Being 7 o'clock on November 5, 2018, I would like to open the regular meeting of the Foxborough School Committee in the Foxborough High Center, Media Center. First, we will have visitors, then we will have approval of minutes, acceptance of donations from FHS DECA and Taylor Elementary School PTO. Then we'll move to training, teaching and learning highlight, which is read aloud recess with the elementary librarian, Mrs. Leslie Ann Foster, and IGO elementary students. FHS overnight travel, 2018 MCAS and baseline and benchmarks report, and review of results by Dr. Berdos, Dr. Mello, Ms. Forrest, Ms. Hendrickson, Ms. Wazalewski, Ms. Machernik, and Ms. White. School committee vote on subcommittee appointments for teacher negotiations, educational assistant negotiations. We'll have the first reading of policy IJNDB, Internet Acceptable Use Policy, AUP, for students. We'll move on to use of building revolving account by Mr. Yukna, and we will end with open matters. Are there any visitors who would like to join us this evening? Okay. We will move on to approval of minutes. And the first one is the draft of our regular meeting of October 15. Are there any additions or corrections? Marilyn?
There's just a typo on page 2, underneath the International OECD. The first sentence, organization with an S.
That's actually how
That's
they-
actually how they do spell it.
yes.
Silly me.
The European spelling.
It's the European spelling.
But that was an eagle eye, Marilyn.
There is a typo.
There you go.
Those kind of
It's
things
okay.
bother me.
Yes.
Well, that's
That's the European way of doing it.
You can find it both
And
ways.
you all seem
I did
to
the
know
same
that.
thing. I did a search on it. I saw it both ways.
That's why.
I
You
actually did.
investigate, I didn't investigate.
I did.
It just was like a little niggle,
Yeah, I
that's all.
saw.
That's funny, thank you.
all right. The S is often, one S is often pronounced a Z like in
funny.
French. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, other than our European spelling, is there anything else particularly noteworthy?
I'll make a motion that we approve the regular minutes for October 15th, 2018.
I'll second that.
All in favor? 500. Thank you. Then there are notes from the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen on October 30. Are there any additions or corrections to that?
I'll make a motion. We accept the minutes from October 30.
I'll second that.
All in favor? 500. Thank you. Now, look back at my schedule. All right, acceptance of donations.
So we typically have our acceptance of donations towards the end of
I
the
know.
agenda. And we have it at the beginning of the agenda because we actually have Mr. John McCabe, our business teacher, along with 4 of our DECA officers here as part of this acceptance of, obviously, you accept that, but the donation to give a little bit of background behind it. So I will turn it over to Mr. McCabe.
Thank you, Dr. Burrows. So I just wanted to just read from an email that the donation came from, and just kind of, I think it will explain what it is and what it's for. Mr. McCabe, I am Collie Stern's dad. I want to thank you for your time and effort with the DECA program at FHS. The program has clearly made a sizable impact on Carly and her future aspirations to pursue a career in business. We are sending a check for $5,000 in today's mail. I hope it allows those less fortunate who may not otherwise be able to experience the same type of inspiration that Carly has. Best regards, Larry Stern, President, Supreme Industrial Products. So it was kind of a a shock, I guess. I don't know. It was a kind of like a out of nowhere kind of thing, and I was like, I had to read it 3 times before I make sure that number was what I was seeing. I was like, so we're just really excited about that. We're just really fortunate that he's able to provide those funds for us, and I think it's going to provide a lot of students who maybe otherwise looked at DECA and said, I can't afford to do that, give them a chance to try it out and have the same experience as other students have been able to have. So we're excited about that.
It's excellent. Very generous.
Do we accept those now?
You can, yes.
Oh, I'd like to make a motion to accept the check for DECA in the amount of $5,000 from Mr. Larry Stern.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Third.
500.
And
you
Callie
very
won,
Take a minute,
Callie won a couple of
introduce your
those, yeah.
wonderful officers that you
Yes.
have there.
So we have, let's see, 3 vice presidents and 1 president. So we have Amelia Ketterer, our president. We have Ashley Vito, vice president. Fundraising, sorry. Good job. We have Elise Perlow, our vice president of publicity. Yes. And we have Chelsea, oh my gosh. Gibbons, sorry, I just blanked out. Our vice president of community service, which actually they're going to talk briefly about. They're doing a community service project for one of their, for their, basically their event.
Yeah, so Elise and I, this year we selected the Community Service Project, which is one of the events that you can compete with for DECA. And this event is a little different than the other ones. In the past, the events, they're mostly just you write up this project, you create a presentation, and you show it to a panel of judges. But for this particular event, we have to plan a community service event, like go through with the event, like have this charity event, and then also write it up, have a presentation, and then present it in front of the judges. And so, do you want to elaborate on what we're doing?
Okay, so our community service project is, so we're hosting a fun little flag football tournament on November 13th, which is a Tuesday after school. And so the charity that we chose is MS because it's near and dear to our hearts. And so how people sign up is we created an email account. So they email us with their team, 7 to 10 people. It's $20 per person or $140 as a team to sign up. And we're hoping to get also gift cards from our DECA
Sponsors.
sponsors and stuff like that. So we can give a couple raffles and stuff like that.
And also, which is really exciting, we have a couple other DECA chapters that we have met through events for like leadership conferences or just competitive events that are really excited about it. So they're coming to play with us. They're forming teams. I think it's Taunton DECA,
Yep.
Neshoba DECA, and Bristol Plymouth DECA so far, which is really exciting that we get to have other DECA chapters do this with us.
It's really wonderful.
Yeah. How many teams do you have signed up already?
We're looking at about 7 to 8 right now. I know we're having a meeting tomorrow after school where we're trying to get some of the other DECA members sign up and make a team because it's considered a chapter event.
Yes.
So everyone in our chapter is supposed to like help out and participate.
They'll participate, and then Ashley and I are the ones who will actually be presenting it and who organize all the details and everything.
Yeah. And also it's exciting because my mom's company actually, where she works, they'll double anything we make.
That's fantastic.
So everything that we make, they're going to double, and it all goes to the National MS Society.
How many students are in DECA this year?
We have 43 signed up.
I miss it every day.
Thanks, Kendall.
Well, I think that the testament here is for what you're talking about and the work that you're doing through community service projects and all of the presentations through all of the competition, and to have a donation like this and to be able to come forward to highlight the work behind it too. It's a wonderful, generous donation, but it's clearly making a difference in what our DECA program, it's continued to grow, talking about the number of students that have continued to join.
How many was it the first year? I don't remember. About.
Was it
25 or 30 that actually went to competition. we've been holding steady the past 2 years, about the same 40, 45. So it's good because you have seniors that leave and then you have new students coming in. So it's,
And what year are each of you?
Oh, we're all seniors.
Yeah, we're all
All
seniors.
seniors.
Yeah.
yeah, so.
last year.
Wow, good.
Oh, you're gonna miss it. Scores.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
You have to come back again and tell us how it goes.
Of course, yes.
we
will.
Thank you.
No, that's not the first donation to DECA that we've received, that they have received,
No,
or we
every year.
have been happy to accept on their behalf. I mean, DECA program has received quite a few donations, some from the Patriots. I think the Rotary Club gave them a big donation. They've just done a wonderful job creating that club and growing it. Had so much success, and a lot of that is Mr. McCabe's credit.
Well, and
Too.
to that, with the competitions to where they've gone to the international
Right.
level, which
Yeah.
is still within the United States, but
Right.
at that level, the travel expenses, it's allowed them to be able to go.
That's right.
Because of those donations.
Exactly. Well, thank you to Mr. Stern. for this
Yes.
one.
The second donation that we have is from the PTO at the Taylor School. And this was an additional, another check was needed for $8.90. So the check here is $323.43. As far as the background here on this, Bill, I don't know if you have any more background on this. My understanding was it was just a difference in what the cost, because this was approved at the PTO meeting in June for them, and it was for book supplies for reading specialist.
I'll make a motion that we approve the check for the
$323.43.
$323.43 for the books and supplies for reading specialists.
I'll second that.
All in favor? 500. Thank you. With gratitude, always with gratitude. Teaching and learning highlights. Read aloud recess. So could Mrs. Foster please bring her IGO students up?
We're really excited to have Mrs. Foster here with Peyton and Kiera and Jackson, and James and Kate. We'll have them introduce so you can put the name with the face.
They'll each get a chance to talk tonight.
Excellent.
All right, thank you very much for inviting us here tonight to actually speak about the Read Aloud Recess program. We already announced we have here, that's Kiera, Kate, James, Jackson, Peyton. And the whole program actually kind of started with an initiative with Peyton here, who was a third grader at the time. They're all now in fourth grade, but this started last spring, where after library, she and I would talk about books and authors, and we would talk about how much we loved to be read to or to read to people. And it sort of evolved into what she thought would make a great program. And she worked really hard to come up with what she wanted as her goals. And we met with Mr. Stanton, who also then he helped us to make sure that it included everyone and was open to just make sure that it was something that people would want to do. All students would want to participate. So we have that the objective of the whole program is actually that now we're going to provide once a week. We do days 4 and 6 of the cycle. We do one grade each of those days, and it's a daily sign up. We drop off a sheet in the classroom. Students get to sign up that day. If they change their mind because something else is going on, that's fine. We're good with it. The sheet comes down at recess, and then they kind of disperse to do their favorite little activities. And right now, as I said, it's 3rd and 4th grade. So, do you want to press it? Okay. And here we have this Peyton with an anchor chart. So we actually, before starting it this fall, we decided to sit down and come up with an anchor chart, which we said were our goals for the whole program. So it was get motivated to read. It was, isn't that awful? Oh, yeah, open mind. You want to say it? You go right ahead. Open your mind to new genres. Accelerate and elevate your literacy. Look, listen, and discuss, and succeed while having fun was the idea we came up with. So now I'll introduce Peyton so she can talk about why the idea evolved.
Well, I knew a lot of people like to read books, create their own books, and taste new books. And I thought it would be great to start a recess club once a week. but I wanted to make sure it was optional because students like to have flexibility to do different things at recess. Sometimes they like to play with friends, maybe read a book, participate in activities. My favorite part of Read Aloud Recess is the Reader's Theater. In the play, I act out the part of the main character, Miss Lotta Scales in Library Dragon. The creation of Read Aloud Recess has been an awesome experience for me.
Okay, you good? All right, does anyone be good with that? Now we also have Kira. So you can go to the next slide. Oh, well, first let me show, this is 4th grade. This is just a little sampling of a snapshot of some of the faces who've been participating regularly. We have approximately, it runs somewhere between like 18 and 23 that have been attending on a given day. And so we've been really fortunate. That's 4th grade.
Exciting.
Then we have 3rd grade. Okay, next one. And this is our Reader's Theater. So I will let Kira do a little talk about it.
My favorite part about Read Aloud Recess is Reader's Theater. We're acting out the book Library Dragon. My part is Miss Lemon and a narrator. We're excited to present it to the younger kids.
And then
I'm in
Kate.
4th grade. I love to go to Read Aloud Recess on day 4. My favorite thing to do is Reader's Theater, but occasionally I like to read to self to enjoy a book and relax.
Okay, you want to go one more? And the next, this seems to be one of the more popular things. I would say 50% are doing bookmaking. So I have with me tonight Jackson, who's pictured on the top, and James, who is below him on the left. Did you want to speak a little? We'll go James first. You want to go to the next slide, actually? There we go. Okay, James.
Hello, my name is James, and what I like about Read Aloud Recess is bookmaking. When you're done with your book, you can put it in the school library like the ones you'll see tonight.
Okay, and that's his on the left. It's The Ghost by James. Okay, Jackson.
Hello, my name is Jackson. As you can see, I am in the process of making a book called The Book of Monsters. It is a chapter/picture book, and it has fantasy monsters. I love bookmaking, and I look forward to it every day 4. I hope one day Miss Foster reads this book to our classes and the kids love the book as I do. Thank you.
Okay. And here's our quiet reading. A few students do actually come with their own book, or I allow them to circulate through the library and select new books, or just kind of take something else.
Book
Or
tasting.
well, that's the next slide. Go to the next one. There you go. Okay. And this one, the highlights I said is about the 20 students per grade. And then we have, we're hoping to do, as right now, the theater and the bookmaking takes up, we take a vote at the beginning. It seems to take up pretty much like half and half. But we're going to do read aloud with guest readers later on, and book tasting of new acquisitions, of which we will actually let them sample all the new collections that we have, and then they can write up little recommendations and stuff. So that is our little adventure this year, sparked by Peyton's really hard work.
I think that's so exciting. Peyton, how do you feel knowing that you had this idea and to see 20 kids coming on those days and enjoying all these different books and activities?
Well, I feel pretty excited about it.
I would think you would.
I think this is the
That's
first
great.
one that I've been part of that came to us from where a student created the thing themselves.
Yeah, that's what's very exciting. It just sort of evolved and really had a game plan and was very motivated, and it went from her to me, and then we both got excited, and then we went to Mr. Stanton, and then
And then it went to everyone.
then rolled out, right? It's been good. It's
I
been
think
very
we should share
exciting.
this with Jarrett Krasowska, who came, the author.
Oh, yes.
Remember when he came and talked about the Lunch Lady series?
Yeah.
He'd probably be very excited about what you're doing.
Oh, he definitely, I think the timing was great for that actually as well too, especially that's probably why we have so many authors and illustrators budding right now.
Fantastic.
Which is good.
I think the part for me as a principal, I think this committee just recently looked at the surveys that were completed, and part of that is giving students a voice, and to sort of see what opportunities come. Because I have to admit, when Peyton came to me, Mrs. Foster, I had my vision of it, and they've taken it to the bookmaking and the theater. And the other part too, it's great to have a voice, but you have to have someone listen, I have to recognize Mrs. Foster. Just, the library should be the heart of a school, and she makes it that. The relationship that she's given to these children. She volunteers this, during her lunch and the other time. That's the part for me. It's a wonderful example. Just very fortunate that we have fantastic students and the staff as well. So it's a winning combination. Feel very fortunate.
And we're actually going to try to roll it out to first and second, hopefully, next year. But Jackson, did you want to say something?
Mrs. Foster is a great library teacher. For like, I think second grade and up, we get to pick out 2 books.
I think it's third grade.
I don't know.
It's good.
And like she allows us to have a privilege to actually have books because most people don't even have books. So it's very. I'm very grateful that we have Mrs. Foster at our school.
I can't.
Well said.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's great.
That's awesome.
Very well spoken.
I think
They're
this is one
awesome.
of the best presentations we've had in a long time.
Well, they're an
This is
awesome
fantastic.
crew. It really, it's been great. So I'm glad we got to share it with you.
I hope you
Well,
all
thank
enjoy
you
it.
for sharing. And good luck with your writing, all of you.
Thank
good
you.
luck, yes.
They'll be in the library soon.
Hope you all enjoy reading the rest of your life.
Mrs. Foster, how are you going to decide on the guest speakers?
Oh, it's funny.
Guest readers, I should
People
say.
have
Populations of books,
volunteered. They've been
Yeah.
like, oh, I have a plan for this book, so it kind of depends.
Yes, so it's going to roll out, and there are
Fun.
some staff who volunteered who said they would go in costume even if we invited, and
That'd be fun.
yes, and so yeah, if
I
you
think
would
there might
like
be some
to
people
come,
around this table.
I might be hinting around at that.
anyone who would like to come is welcome.
We've done it
But
at
we
the
already
Hearn.
know who we're going to see. So.
That's right, it'll be a surprise.
We have read at
At
Read
the
Across
Hearn, yeah.
America.
See?
We have experience, and I worked as a library volunteer at the Taylor School for about 6 years.
I went to the Taylor in
Yeah.
kindergarten.
Yeah,
But
I
then
did.
I moved to the
I had
Igo
already
because
graduated from
because
there.
I moved to a different house.
Well, you lucked into Mrs. Foster there at the IGO.
Well, you are certainly all invited to come read.
We would
if
love
you
to.
like.
I know Mrs.
Yeah.
Ballinger would love to.
Maybe Jared might come visit us again.
With the costume.
Wouldn't that be nice?
With the
With the
well,
costume.
I think the lunch ladies will be very happy to volunteer.
That too.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You guys are awesome. They are too sweet. Oh, I love that age.
So cute.
Yes. Oh, that was
That is
great.
awesome.
Adorable.
Okay.
And smart. Yes. All very well spoken.
Okay, on to FHS overnight travel.
Mrs. Myers-Packla come up. This is our annual request with all of the different events that are planned for the near future.
Good evening.
Good evening, welcome.
I do not believe that there is anything new on our list of travel that we have. A couple of things that shift are, for instance, the History Club's trip to Philadelphia. That varies just from year to year as far as where the club goes out to, and this year it's back to Philly. They haven't been there in a few years yet. So the others are, as you see them, our England trip will be happening this year. And essentially Ellington, of course, would be based upon whether or not we're selected in for that. And then, of course, the Hale School in July, which is new, but you folks have already seen and given that approval on that as we move forward. The April Music Festival is to New York City. It is a little bit shorter this year, and consideration was given by the music department with it being New York. It is a little bit closer. You leave earlier in the morning, and your day starts right away. But that was to give some consideration to cost and other factors with the Australia trip coming up this summer for families. So that's a little bit shorter than it has been in years past.
And the, if we back up, the 2019 MASC Annual Conference, that's with the students?
Yes, that's every year. That's the State Student Council Conference that is held in
There's
March.
Massachusetts Student
Association of
Council.
Student Councils, yes.
Thank you.
Same initials as school.
I know, I just.
I saw it too, and I was a little confused. My daughter went to one of them.
Yeah, clarification would
Yes.
be good. Bill went on that.
It has been attended by our students now for
Yeah,
years.
Juliet used to go to
Years,
all the time.
Yes,
Right.
so.
So we're looking for approval for these overnight travel events.
It looks like the DECA, the dates for the DECA competition, it just says 2017, so maybe we should just change that
Oh,
to
where's that?
2019.
Oh, I see that.
It's like halfway down.
To Orlando and Hilton.
Oh, I see.
And I'm pretty sure those young ladies and the rest of the, are going to qualify, to be honest with you.
I believe when
They
this
have every year.
was put together, it was without a total completion. My apologies on that. Sheila Sunita's out on a medical surgery, so that just wasn't caught up before it was sent out. So my apologies, but we'll
We can
make that change
We can
on
make a
that.
correction right now.
And if anybody's wondering on the Philadelphia itinerary, because I did look it up, maybe this is one of those history, what's the word, trivia
Yeah.
pieces on what is Eastern, where do I have it on the Philly one? Eastern State. Any ideas?
I don't.
I didn't know either as a history person myself, but it's
Then I don't feel
actually.
so bad for not knowing.
It's a state penitentiary that's now a historical building that was used from the 1800s.
It's a state penitentiary?
Through, yes, it was used in the 1800s through 1971, and it was considered to be, at one point, kind of forward-thinking in the fact that they had prisoners kept individually in cells without roommates, but that's because it was solitary confinement. And it was believed that if you had hours on end to spend thinking about all the things that you've done wrong, that would help to rehabilitate you. So it is now a historic site, and it's one of the places that the students will actually be touring.
1800s, 1971?
I believe 1971.
Very interesting.
History lesson for the day.
It was, history lesson for the day.
Very good. Wow. I'm awaiting a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion that we approve the Foxborough High School overnight travel.
I'll second that.
All in favor? 500.
Thank you so
very
much for your support on this.
Thank you, David.
Once again, learning outside the classroom, whatever we can do to
Always a
enhance
good
what goes
thing.
on in the classroom, it's a good thing. Thank
We're
you.
lucky we have so many teachers that are willing to take large groups of students on these trips.
Yes,
It's fantastic. Every trip my kids have gone on has been phenomenal.
Thank you.
All right, now, 2018 MCAS and Baseline and Benchmarks Report and the review of the results. Dr. Verdos.
So
And crew.
and crew. So we'll have the crew come forward. I know Dr. Mello's going to be joining them as well. So this is one talking about a little bit of a change in roles. Usually, in the past 7 years, I've been joining that group, so it feels a little odd not to be.
Feeling left out?
I do feel a little left out. Many conversations, though, about all of the results. So, Dr. Mello, while she switches over the PowerPoint, for those that may be at home and not know, we have Laureen White from Guidance Department. She's the chair. Alyssa Marcharnik, Science Department Chair. Mrs. Wazalewski, English Department Chair, will be joining us. She's in the middle of class, actually. So she'll be joining us here in a few minutes. And then we have Noelle Hendrickson, K-8 Math Science Curriculum Director, Sue Forrest, K-8 English Language Arts and Social Studies Curriculum Director. And of course, thank you to our fabulous principals back there, Mrs. Abrams, Mr. Stanton, Mrs. Myers-Packla, for being here this evening, because it is definitely all of our data and all of our work, from the classroom to all of us that have a hand in what takes place every day in classrooms. So Allison, I will turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming, so I don't have to sit here by myself. it is a little strange because I'm usually in Noelle's seat to be doing this piece, and I have a lot more empathy for Amy about how much goes into, putting this whole report together now. So thank you all for your valuable contributions. As you know, each year we come to the table here and give you an update on how we perform as a district on our state testing, which is the MCAS. We're going to transition with MCAS to the next generation MCAS. We're in between. We're going to go over that a little bit because the high school is still on the legacy MCAS. And we'll also share with you our baseline and benchmarks data that we collect internally. So that's basically what's going to comprise this report. And initially, let me see if our clicker is working. Hi, that was quick. Welcome to the table.
Thanks.
On the first slide, we have our information regarding our students eligible for free and reduced lunch. As you may know, we started our breakfast program this year, and we do have many students taking advantage of that opportunity. I actually saw the students this morning at the Taylor School getting their breakfast. I hadn't seen it in action yet. It's really cool. The kids are really excited by it. As you can see, our numbers are pretty consistent. What did I do? There we go. Do you have a pointer on this one?
I don't know if I do or not.
Oh, yep, you do. One of the interesting changes of note is at the Borough School, where we had almost a 7% increase in our free and reduced lunch. And so I was talking with Michelle McCarthy about that. She actually couldn't be here this evening, but she was talking about they think they've done a better job of making people aware that this opportunity is available to them so that more people have taken advantage of it. And maybe partly with the awareness of the breakfast program, more people have thought to take advantage of the free and reduced lunch program. So I just wanted to point that out. We have had some small declines in our free and reduced lunch programs at the Ahern Middle School too. So I just wanted to point that out as well. As we move into our second table on that page, it's the special education population, and we track our percentage of students who are identified for special education services. You'll notice our district-wide number includes all of our out-of-district placements as well. So those are students who've been identified to need services beyond what we offer in Foxborough Public Schools. We have noticed some fluctuations in our numbers, and we've spent a lot of time talking about what could be the root cause of the change in those numbers. One of the interesting ones to note is Foxborough High School seems to be pretty consistent, and you notice a couple of years ago we had a dip, and that sort of maintained the same. Same with the Ahern Middle School, we're about the same. In our elementary schools, we've had some small increases at the Borough. We had a small increase at the IGO. We've had a pretty significant increase at the Taylor Elementary School. So we have been heavily investigating and looking at the data for some trends. That's actually in progress right now. These numbers are based on our October 1st data that we have. So Dr. Einsel, unfortunately, she couldn't be here this evening either. It has been preparing some reports for us so that we can do a further investigation about why we're seeing some of the increase in those numbers. By the way, Dr. Bertos, anytime you want to jump in, since you have owned this report forever, feel free.
Yeah. And I think just going to the point there on looking at the numbers, you can see it fluctuates for some of the years. We've also, asking those questions, we've had some students move in with IEPs, and so that automatically makes a difference in your population too. So
we've also started to see students identified at a much younger age with IEPs. So again, there's a lot of things to research and consider, but that's why we do this report every year so that we can get in front of some of the trends that we're seeing. On the next slide, and feel free to interject with questions if you have any. This is what we've been reporting to you for the last few years to track the enrollments of our English learner students, and we know that that trend has continued to increase. As you know, a couple of years ago, you approved an increase in our personnel to help manage the caseload of our students that we have. We're up to 19 languages now in Foxborough Public Schools, and we've had an influx of students at the kindergarten level this year who are English learners, and our numbers continue to increase. Now, the printed report that you have of the baselines and benchmarks actually had the number 59. That was our number as of October 1st. Our most recent number is 66. So that will also just give you an idea of how students are moving in and how things are changing and how we're responding to that. You want to add anything?
Just talking about the support where we increased, this is our year where we now have 2 full-time English language learner teachers, because before it was a 0.5 position with our second So as you can see by the numbers, it's definitely.
It's an 11% increase, and we've had a significant increase, again, in the kindergarten level of students who are English learners. That, to me, is actually good news because it gives us a lot of time for intervention so that we can get kids into our population.
Good.
Okay, so this is the time we're going to get into the high school MCAS results. Just by way of review, high school continues to take the legacy MCAS, which means it's the traditional test. It's paper and pencil. It's not the computer-based assessment that we've been taking in grades 3 through 8. And it is still the competency determination for students. And we'll talk more about some of the changes that are coming to the MCAS at the high school level in a moment. But first, we are going to look at, we're going to look at the math. And Sue Carl could not be here. She's the department head for math. It's too bad that she couldn't be here to celebrate the great results that they continue to have in math. As you can see, we have 65% of our students achieving advanced on the math MCAS, and a combined for advanced proficient is 91%. We continue to be well above the state, 13% above the state. It's interesting that the shape of the data tends to be pretty consistent, and we're on a similar trend line. I think we're going to find that across all of our content areas. And for the students who need a little bit more time, we have our retest coming up for MCAS. It's this month, right?
Next week.
Next week.
Oh, no, this week.
This
Thursday.
week. This week.
Boy,
There we
time
go.
flies.
Yes. And I think if Sue were here, she would talk about how they feel very proud of the curricular changes that they've made to not only, I think it's easy to think that this is just a maintenance of these results. However, the standards have changed, and the standards are finally being assessed in the assessment. So we're looking more at those practice standards. So I know she's really proud of the consistency they've been able to maintain in mathematics. Okay, I will shift it over to our wonderful science department head, Alyssa Macharnik.
So, I think the take-home message for me when I look at this is that we started testing both 9th and 10th graders in biology last year as we were converting the students over to all 9th graders taking biology. There was a lot of fear going into that. Oh my gosh, are the students going to be able to pass? It's a whole year earlier. They're not mature. They don't study the same way. Panic, panic, panic. And it turns out that when you treat them like they're responsible and that they're capable of handling it, that they're responsible and they're capable of handling it. And so this number represents, with all freshmen, I believe we had 4 sophomores who took the bio MCAS last year, that we have continued success and that there's no reason to panic. We are going into our changeover to the next generation standards, which were adopted in 2016, but our curriculum right now is tightly aligned with the 2006 standards because those are the ones being assessed on this test. And so we're now making the transition, and it should take us another 2 years, and hopefully it'll all be smooth sailing. Didn't go crazy when we had bio for 9th graders. It shouldn't be crazy to be transitioning more to a practice focus rather than a content focus in the testing.
And for your testing, it will remain a paper and pencil test for now.
2 more years.
Yes, 2020, they will shift. All right.
Have you identified anything in the 9th grade taking the bio that limits the ability to get more into the advanced? Because obviously it slid down proficient. So I wouldn't assume it's a math thing, but is there anything in there that the 9th grade you've identified?
We haven't identified anything specifically. We have to do a review as a department of all of the item analysis, and we didn't get that until later than we have in the past. So it's coming. I would guess that it continues to be an issue of literacy skills. They're improving every year, which is what we expect. And so in 10th graders, they're more able to read the passage and understand it as compared with the 9th graders, but we're actively working on increasing the literacy that we're using in the classroom across all 4 grades right now.
Great.
And it is a shift for freshmen to be, right?
It is a big shift.
So they're still transitioning to that as well. Okay, we'll move on to English Language Arts, and we have our wonderful English department head, Shannon Wazlewski. Thanks for joining us.
Sorry, I was late.
No, you're fine.
He explained that you were in class.
I was in class, yes, I was upstairs in class.
She's trying to
And
become
then-
Dr. Wazlewski.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Right.
And so I was like, sorry, I gotta go. So we are very excited to celebrate another good year of success with 95% of our students achieving proficient or advanced on the MCAS exam. We have really focused on our writing the last couple of years. It's kind of now old news, but we brought in John Collins a couple of years ago so that we could continue the good progress that they make in the younger grades. And I think that has really paid off. We've also really taken a look at the pieces that we do and aligned them in classrooms. And then we have aligned our skills-based assessments at the end of the year. And so that's really helped us to focus on teaching skills, which I think we see in the results here.
And I will say, just to add to all three departments, I know, and you can expound upon this if you want to, have worked really hard on creating units through the backward design process, UBD. We've been building those units and really starting to think a lot about assessment and how we use our assessments and how we build our assessments and what our assessments look like and being common across the grade levels. And I think that's helped match the rigor of the assessments that are coming down the pike with our MCAS, because we know it's going to change a little bit for the high school in the future. Anything you want to add about assessments or Illuminate or anything? No?
We use Illuminate to do an end-of-the-year assessment, and then that information gets passed on to the next year's teacher of those students so that they can actually pull a report and see where their weaknesses and strengths are and kind of change instruction strategies to kind of match those strengths and weaknesses, which I think this is the first year we really had that opportunity to do that, and it was really, really awesome for the teachers to be able to pull up students that they didn't have before.
Right.
And really get a good picture of what they're capable of.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that these kinds of results don't happen by accident. There's tons of reflection. There's a lot of use of data and technology and revising and reflecting so that we continue to put the best curriculum in front of
We're
students.
using Illuminate as well, but in a very different way for formative assessments, day to day and week to week, so that we can make those on-the-fly decisions about, okay, and on second thought, I do not need to spend an extra 20 minutes on this topic, and we can really dive deep on these other things we're doing that day.
That's great. Thank you.
You're not using Illuminate?
No.
Okay.
And guidance. I know. So I'm going to turn it over to Maureen White, our department head for guidance, to share some results about advanced placement, SATs, ACTs, and continuing education.
Okay, great. So APs, as you can see, our numbers keep going up, and that's what we want. So this year, the 2018, we had 204 students take an AP or more exam. We administered 432 exams. Some students will take multiple APs. Other students will take one. We just encourage every student to try it because it really gives them a good idea of what a college level course is. And a number of students getting 3 or better is also increasing. We're at 163 this past year, and we're pretty consistent over the last few years, a huge jump since 2014. But almost 80% score in 3 or better. So the teachers are doing a really good job, and Diana really encouraging every student to take an AP exam has really helped on our numbers.
And I think you've talked in past years about how amazing it is that that number has remained consistent in spite of nearly doubling the number of students participating in the test. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and what we do, we try to identify the students really young, if they have AP potential, either through teacher recommendation or some kind of standardized test, so students know that they do have the potential, whether it's the following year or their junior or senior year. So yeah, it's great. So SATs and ACTs. So it's a little different. SATs, they changed the formatting of the test, so we're not able to get a benchmark, but as you can see, our numbers were really high last year. Our evidence-based reading and writing was 560 and our math was 574. like I said, I think we did really well, but I can't give you a benchmark just because we don't have 3 years of data to compare and to come up with an average.
No, but we could tell what the national average was. We scored, the national average in the evidence-based reading writing was 533. So we were 27 points over the national average for that test. And for math, the national average was 527, so we were 47 points over the national average. So I think that's better than pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's outstanding.
No, yeah, it's outstanding. You're absolutely right.
And also you're doing the ACTs. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so ACTs as well. So last year we had, 24 in English was the average score, math 23.8, reading 24.8, science 23.7, and composite 24.2. And again, that keeps increasing. What our real goal is to get more students to take the ACTs. I think that the more students we have take it, the better off we're gonna do. But again, we're doing fantastic with the ACTs for the students who take it.
Yeah, and I know you're wondering, so the national average on that was 20, and we were 24.2, so above as
What do
well.
you see the colleges accepting? Are they starting to lean toward ACTs now? Or is it still all over? Like
It's still, yeah,
okay.
really. There's no preference, to be honest with you. Whether you take the ACT or the SAT, all colleges will take both.
Okay.
Okay. It really depends on the region that you live, which tends to be, like students in California, most of them don't take the SATs.
Right.
So, and most of the students around here don't take the ACTs. But we're trying to even it out because some students, once they take the ACTs, they're like, I did so much better. I don't know why.
Right.
But we just got to get that word out there that you should take both of them.
Some kids do better on ACT and SAT, so it's two different learning.
They're just, yeah.
Yeah.
And the style of the test is just very, very different.
Okay.
So.
And also that here recently, they were talking about the percentage of students taking ACT versus SAT, and SAT had just recently had an increase, but it has to do with the region and with states and whether they end up having a contract with the testing vendor, and then they end up increasing. So you have to really look into those numbers of where the increases are and why.
Yeah.
And more schools are becoming test optional, right?
Absolutely, yes. And if they're test optional, they're not looking for the tests at all. They're actually asking us not to send them, so.
Is that increasing rapidly?
I was gonna say, is
Test
that-
optional?
is that common?
I mean, I've seen the articles about the schools not even looking for it anymore.
I guess it depends on what you mean by rapidly, but yes, it seems to be. It seems to be the going trend, and there's like you said, there's all these articles out there about the reason why you don't want to put so much emphasis on a one day. You want to look at the whole, 4 years of a student's high school. Yeah. It's interesting. It really is.
That's a good segue into continuing
Yeah,
education.
continuing education, okay.
There you
So,
go.
again, you see it's very consistent. About 90% of our students go on to college after school, whether it's a 4-year or a 2-year, and it's still, majority of them are 4-year, but we are noticing a steady amount still going to 2-year school. And that's the kind of school we are. We're getting kids ready for college. So that's consistent over the years. And the schools that they're getting accepted into are phenomenal, as you guys all know. So we're doing really good with that, too.
Any questions for our high school team?
I was just going to thank you for your work on AP. I think people should take that data that we showed about the increase of people participating. That's a big step for a school, don't you think?
I think it's
That
great.
The more kids that are taking a chance at that AP and that college curriculum, the better off that you're exposing them. So
Yeah.
I think it's an important point for people to understand.
Yeah, and like Alyssa said, you give them the challenge and they step up, and they do,
To maintain the percent of students that are scoring 3 or better, when it is maybe a reach for some students, I think this is a really important data point to keep in mind too, to where they're performing. So they're not just taking that, but they're still the 3 or higher, we're able to maintain that consistency.
Agreed.
Especially when we keep it open, we offer it to everybody. And any student can take one, where you're going to hear from other schools where you have to meet certain criteria in order to take it. We don't do that. We just trust them. If this is what you want to do, you can take it. And like you said, they still score 3 or better. So.
And we have such a variety that it appeals to so many different learners.
Absolutely.
VHS.
And VHS, exactly. And VHS.
I'm a huge fan.
It's true.
All right, well, I think we will let our high school people depart. What do you say?
Thank you.
Thank you. The whole thing? Oh, you have to stay through the whole thing, I'm sorry. I was gonna let you. Oh. All right, so we are going to move on to the next, actually, there are parts that do pertain to you. Okay. Next generation MCAS. This is sort of a review from last year. Although, Rich, you weren't with us last year, were you, at this time? So this will be new for you. We moved to a next generation MCAS last year following our experience with Park. And Massachusetts decided to go to an updated version of their 20-year-old assessment. It was time. It is a computer-based assessment. The focus of the old MCAS was really on proficiency on grade level standards, and we've shifted with this MCAS on readiness for the next grade level and the likelihood to be successful in the next grade level. Paper versions of the test are available even though it is computer-based assessment. Usually that's for students who have it as an accommodation in their IEP. We first gave it last year. So last year when we gave the computer-based assessment, it was students in grades 4 through 8. So all of those students took the test on the computer. This year, third graders also joined, so it was a full implementation 3 through 8. And eventually, it will replace the legacy test at the high school as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So last spring, as I just said, grades 3 through 8 took the test on the computers. And as I said, it marked the first computer-based MCAS for grade 3. I suppose I should add that it was also the first computer-based for our 4th grade students since they didn't take it in 3rd grade on a computer. Next spring will be the first administration of the computer-based assessment for the high school ELA and math only. So in MCAS, in the legacy assessment, I'm sure you're really familiar with these levels and you remember them. We had advanced, proficient, needs improvement, and warning. And if you look at the language of all of those, it was really about the subject matter that they learned in that grade level, in their sort of their command of that subject matter. When we look at the next generation MCAS, they've changed sort of the vernacular. We are exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, partially meeting or not meeting. And when you dig into the explanations, we're looking at mastery of the subject matter, but if you go down to like the next levels, you can see academically on track to succeed in the current grade in this subject. And in the next one, you can see the school, in consultation with the student's parent or guardian, should consider whether the student needs additional academic assistance to succeed in the subject. There's a lot more information coming back to parents about what these results mean and how they can be actionable. Before, it felt very much like that was over and we're done with it and we're on to the next thing, and this has really shifted the lens on that. These are the reports that the parents see. There's actually, this is in the presentation more than once. Sort of shows the parents where their student is along the spectrum here, and then it reminds them of the description. And at the bottom of the report, it gives the child's score in comparison to the school, which is really important at the elementary schools. The district, so if I'm at the Burrell School, that's going to be different than the district score. Obviously, if I'm at the Ahern, it's the same. And then a comparison to the state, so that parents can have some context for what these scores mean to them. So we are going to dig into our results on the MCAS, and we're going to start with the middle school English language arts, and I'm going to welcome Ms. Sue Forche to the table.
Great.
Our great curriculum director.
Hi, everybody. So just taking a look at these 4 quadrants up here, you can see that the top left is grade 5, grade 6 to the right, and 7 and 8 on the bottom left and right respectively. And if you just, again, as Allison had mentioned earlier, look at sort of the shape of the data. So the band of colors on the left is our district-wide data, so the Ahern data for each grade level against the state, which is measured on the right. And so if you follow sort of the shape of that data, that you can see there's a relative consistency there in terms of how we're performing against the state. And when we wrap up those percentages and you look at grade 5 students, for 2018, we had about 53% in the district who were meeting or exceeding the expectations. It was about 56% at the state there. They're relatively comparable. I have to say that those numbers overall don't tell the full picture. When we looked at the grade 5's typically been a transition year. They come from 3 elementary schools into our middle school. And when we compared the 2017 data, they have made a marked improvement to 2018, which was really worth celebrating, particularly because it's just that second year of this new next gen assessment. So we were really pleased with that.
When it's comparing it to the state, is that including the schools that still did it on paper?
You know, that's a good question. I
think
think
it is.
so.
I think
Yeah, I
it's
think
the
it's
whole
everybody,
collection,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
The schools that did it on the computers did worse than the ones on paper.
Particularly in ELA, yes. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yep,
Chris.
great. And so as you look at sixth grade, the band is similar there. We've got a bump in terms of that 47% for the district who met expectations compared to the state at about 40, but they're relatively comparable numbers there. And then seventh grade, again, the bands are similar. Our seventh grade overall had the greatest leap in terms of having 51%, if I'm doing the math correctly, for students who are meeting or exceeding expectations compared to 46% in the state there. And then when we get to eighth grade, there is a marked gap there for this particular year, and there wasn't as much a gap in the previous year for grade 8. But actually, it wasn't really a surprise to us because based on the processes through the English Language Arts Curriculum Review of 2016-17 and the work we did with teacher teams to dig into some of the needs, the identified needs that we've had, both looking at our historic state data and our local data and survey data from teachers and such, we knew that there were a couple of points that we needed to make a shift in. Overall at the Ahern, one of the things we know for sure is that our former online assessment platform that we were using really didn't have the rigor that sort of allowed us to predict how well they would do in the state assessments. So we have, as you've heard the high school folks talk about, made that switch to Illuminate as our online assessment platform, and the standards that we can select from and the question types and the level of rigor overall, the passages feel more authentic. And they also offer many multiple passage reading experiences where students have to do more comparison, more analytical work with that. And so I think we anticipate that that switch is going to yield us a better result. And not only in terms of the performance on the state assessment, but really internally. So when we start to look at our benchmark assessments through Illuminate, and then ultimately we get to that those end-of-year results or the fall results that we get for the previous year for MCAS, it's going to help us really drill into specifically what are those needs and how can we work as teams to really do the work that we need to do in response to those results. So I'm really excited about the Illuminate because it will become a better predictor, I think, than what we've had in the past. The other piece, I just want to comment on the eighth grade because we'll see that again with one of the upcoming slides, is out of that ELA review, one of the greatest things that we recognized is that they had an outdated core text resource, and they were looking for more current texts and more diverse texts to meet the choice needs, the preferences of their students, but that also reflect who their changing body of students are, and again, that level of rigor with some of the texts. And so with that, we responded by purchasing, if you'll recall the report out last year at this time, we purchased StudySync, which is a core literary resource. It's marketed for grades 6 through 12, and we purchased it for our grades 6 and 8 directly in response to the needs that we had at those grade levels. We didn't purchase it for grade 7. All grade levels 6 through 8 did follow a uniform process for looking at that system, but they matched it against some of the resources that they currently have, which don't look the same at each grade level. And it was ultimately 6 and 8 who made that decision. It helps them much more personalize the instruction for students. It provides for that student choice, but in addition, it also has a great layer of formative and summative tools within, and so those are going to be further tools that really help us check on students and monitor their comprehension and their progress, both in reading and writing along the way. So we're excited about those opportunities.
And I think it will, and we've seen it already, increase their engagement with
Exactly.
reading. Because it's
Exactly.
hard to compete with all of their devices and everything as they
Right.
get older.
Okay, so when we look at grades 3 and 4, we've got the grade 3 results at the top and the grade 4 results in the band at the bottom. And again, if you sort of follow those trends, I think you can see in grade 3 we had 57% of our students who are meeting and exceeding compared to 52% in the state. So I feel like we're on track there. And again, as Dr. Mello had mentioned, that was last year was the first year that grade 3 students took this online. I think the younger they are, the less flappable they are sometimes with these new platforms. And then grade 4, the same at the bottom. And so we can see that I think we're in relatively good shape. And these results don't surprise me at all, because while those students are tested in grades 3, 4, and on from there, we know that that's not where all of the onus lay. And it's not where all of the instruction starts and ends. So we really have to give kudos to our kindergarten teachers, our first grade, second grade teachers, and so on, for the structures that they have put in place systematically through what we call the Daily 5 in K1 and 2, and the Readers Writers Workshop, which is explicitly done in 3, 4, 5, and 6. And that really has provided some continuity of practice. And I think the results may reflect that here. So this piece, just really quickly, we talk about grade level progress and we say this year grade 5 did this and the next year grade 5 did that, but we're looking at different students. So this is just a quick chart that shows you, that helps you follow a cohort, for example. And so if you look at you've got the grade levels down the end here, and if you look at that center band, which looks at students who, from 17 to 18, who are not meeting or only partially meeting their expectations, if you follow the yellow arrows down diagonally, you can follow the cohort group. So in this first collection, we really want to see that the numbers go from a higher to a lower, because we want to decrease those numbers of the students in the not meeting or the partially meeting. And so grade 3, for example, in 2017, 49% of students fell into that category, whereas as fourth graders, that same group had decreased to 46%. And if you jump down to fifth grade, 64%, and that decreased to 49%, which only meant on the other side that those numbers were going to go up, and that was worth celebrating. So if you look at grade 5, for instance, in the middle of that band in 2017, 35% were meeting or exceeding expectations, whereas that same group of students in sixth grade showed 51% were falling within that band. Grade 8, we know, if you look at the seventh grade over there, as seventh graders in 2017, 45% were in the meeting or exceeding, and we just identified the fact that as eighth graders, there was a bit of a dip in their results. But again, we go back to some of the root causes that we had identified and spoke to our action steps that we are taking deliberately toward making those improvements. And you may want to talk about grade 8. When we look at the grade 8, at 68% of students in grade 8 meeting or exceeding, and then jumping to their performance as high school students.
Right, so as they get to 10th grade, and we know that's their competency determination, and feel free to jump in anytime, we see that group of students, now granted it's two different tests, right? We have the legacy assessment and the next generation, which we know the next generation is more rigorous, but we're seeing that same group who were 68% meeting and exceeding were 95% when they get to 10th grade, so if you follow the cohort over. The thing is that I think is really important to note is, and Amy pointed this out last year, when the MCAS, and it's on a later slide, but when the MCAS was originally rolled out 20 years ago, a lot of people scored very poorly on it. This is only year 2, so we would expect that this would happen from year to year. Amy came up with this format a couple of years ago to show that, and we didn't have it last year because it was the first year of the new assessment. And as I was preparing for the presentation, I was like, where is that chart? I love that chart because it really allows us to follow the cohort. What I think is also interesting is even though these are two different groups of kids, we can also follow it linearly this way and also see those same decreases from the first year to the second year. And we hope to see that those trends will continue.
That's a great visual.
Yeah.
It is.
Do we have any questions on that? All right, then we're going to transition into mathematics. As you all remember, Noelle Hendrickson, our new K-8 math science director, and she's going to start talking about the middle school math results.
Good evening, everybody. I know I'm relatively new. I've been here for not that long, but I still feel a good sense of pride in sharing all of this data with you because there's a lot to celebrate in the math world. Thanks in big part to Allison. So I just wanted to highlight the shape of the data in these graphs. You see grade 5 upper left, grade 6 upper right, bottom left is 7, and bottom 8 is 8th grade. And so you see the shapes of these graphs, and we're outperforming the state in some cases significantly in all of those grades in middle school. What's really nice is things start to sort of feel a little more lopsided starting in 6th grade in our favor in terms of being larger margins above the state. And that continues up to 8th grade. And the sort of beauty of this data for me is that our 8th graders are leaving middle school with the highest percentage of exceeds and meetings expectations from 3rd grade to 8th grade. So I think that speaks to the vertical program that's happening in Foxborough from K to 8. And this has been consistent the last few years, is that our 8th graders are at the top of that. So I think that's a really nice thing to celebrate.
Interesting to see it through your eyes since you just joined us.
Yes. And then in terms of our 3rd and 4th grade, again, they outperform the state in every category there too as well. You can see the shapes of those graphs. We're outperforming the state in the meeting and exceeding expectations, but then also, I also like to point out the not meeting expectations. I think that the fact that those numbers are low also speaks to the quality of the programming that's happening. And remember that this was the first time that these 3rd and 4th graders were taking an online assessment.
I think what this makes me think of is how consistent this is with the OECD results that we have, with math being the strongest out of that report as well.
So similar to what Sue shared with you, this is the sort of progression cohort-wise. So if you look, we want to see on the left side over there, we want to see a decrease from 2017 to 18 on the left because of that's the not meeting expectations. And then on the right, we'd like to see somewhat of an increase. But if you look sort of at the bottom, the overall grades 3 through 8, from 2017 to 2018, we had 38% to 31%, which is a nice decrease overall. And we stayed very consistent with our high performance of the meeting and exceeding.
Questions? So in understanding the results, we've touched upon a lot of this already. This assessment is more rigorous. When these standards came out, they were focused not just on the content standards, but on the practices, justifying your reasoning, critiquing someone else's argument, being able to explain everything that you're doing. So this is our 2nd year with this assessment. I personally was really happy that the assessment caught up to the style of instruction that we were doing. I still think it can continue to get better, and I suspect that it will as we go through some time. And as noted on the slide, we expect it to, even if the assessment gets harder, we still expect our results to improve, just as they did on the legacy MCAS when it first came out. Again, it's to help signal students' readiness, the results of this test. That's how you interpret them for the next grade level. And it's really all about college and career readiness, which is what you've been hearing for the last few years. And for the parents at home, they can look at the score report to see where their children fall, as we showed in that lower corner, in terms of their peers in the school, in the district, and across the state. And as a reminder, last year they set the baseline for this. And they're still looking, there were working committees for each grade level on these cut scores for these categories. Those still are not 100% determined if they're going to stay where they are. They're continuing to track the data.
And they've been very clear about not comparing your own child's scores to the year before because of the change in
Right.
assessment. So I think that's a really important piece for parents at home to keep in mind, especially if you have a child that's taken, aside from taking the next generation the last 2 years, and especially if they've had the legacy MCAS and maybe they were exceeding before. Or they were advanced, and now you're looking at maybe they're partially meeting. You cannot compare.
And if they're partially meeting, it doesn't mean that they're learning less. It means that the standard is a little bit higher. And so there's things, remember, a lot of this is for us to reflect on our instruction and our programming, and that's how we intend to use it.
Right.
I'll let you keep going about science.
Yes, so the science for grade 5, the exam is testing content for grades 3, 4, and 5. Grade 8 is assessing content for 6, 7, and 8. We fall right in line with the state in regards to our 5th grade data for the percentage of proficient and advanced. And then for grade 8, we fall above the state in terms of our proficient and advanced.
So for the science, I think it's really important to note 2 things. One, this is the legacy assessment still. But more importantly, they are still testing on the old standards, the 2001, 2006, as Alyssa mentioned. We transitioned to the new standards 2.5 years ago, because when we knew they were coming and they were going to adopt, because they had been talking about it for, 9 years or something with the next generation. You'll remember we talked about it here. We decided to go ahead and make the shift. And we knew that we would have a dip in our results because the assessment is not matching our instruction. So I expect next year that we will see an increase. It's interesting to me, though, and I would love to know, the state has had a steady decline here, too. So I wonder how many people are in the same category as us that actually adopted the standards and are going. Because when I talk to people, a lot of people are saying they didn't, which is surprising to me. But there has to be people who are, because it would explain that data. So that's why that graph looks different, just to signal that we have the legacy assessment there.
That, and to Noelle's point too, when we think about it, assessing 6, 7, and 8, different districts can
Right.
choose what they had in 6th grade or in 7th
Correct.
grade or in
That's
8th
right.
grade.
Yeah,
That's right.
good point.
And so Allison kind of spoke to this just now, but we were early adopters, and we have really strong beliefs that these are rigorous, great standards that call for a lot of critiquing, reasoning, explanation, inquiry, critical thinking. And we're going to see that this year, because spring 2019 will be the first time that we have the assessment that's going to match the newer standards that we've adopted. Our professional development opportunities too for teachers, we've actually shifted a lot even this year. It hasn't been as much content science, it's been about the practices. So we're getting teachers to dig into the science practices that we're talking about that are really sort of these overarching habits of mind that good scientists and good mathematicians and good readers have. So it's all kind of connected for them as well.
And what employers want.
Isn't that right?
So a few reminders that I've already reviewed, but the next generation science test will be given in 5 through 8 for the first time this spring. We will continue to be a paper-based assessment at the high school, and they will not be fully assessed on the new standards until 2020, so they have some time to get their alignment. In English, language, arts, and math, MCAS continues to be a graduation requirement, a competency determination. The class of 2021 will take the next generation MCAS, ELA, and math as their competency determination in spring 2019. And I suspect, I don't know, I suspect that's why they're still playing with those levels, because, part of this, you may remember when we had Commissioner Chester, and I'm not going to get the percentages exactly right, but he talked about the catalyst for this change was, I think it was 60%, you might know, Maureen, 60% of our students who scored proficient on math MCAS were taking remedial math courses at the 2-year colleges. So that was not a good indication of readiness. And I think it dropped to like 30-something% for 4-year colleges. And we know that those are not credit-bearing courses that kids have to pay money for, and it discourages them from staying in school. So this was really an effort with higher ed to raise the rigor and make sure that kids are more ready for college and career by matching the curriculum to the assessment. So we'll see how that goes when they do this first implementation of it. Parent reports, as we mentioned earlier, they should have received reports already. I think it's trickiest for parents who have students in grades 5 and 8 because they have a combination of the legacy test and the next generation test. So they're having both different levels and different representations on the report. So the Department of Ed has put out a lot of good resources for parents. As we said earlier, keep in mind these tests are still new. We are adjusting on our end to the expectation. I think we've been very proud in Foxborough that we don't teach for tests, we teach for learning, and we are really proud of the curriculum that we have, and we expect to see the result of great teaching and great learning, because that's what we do here. Again, that's the report. This is another piece of the report, and one of the things I really like about this, having moved to a standards-based report card at the elementary level, I think parents are used to a certain level of information. This really breaks it down into the domains. This is a math example to see where were the strengths and where are the areas that we can improve upon, which really informs teachers as well as parents. It also shows, here are the questions and here are the points that we earned. The state does release some questions, so we can use some of that for our own professional learning. However, they don't release as many as they used to. I think we get about half of the questions to use and reflect on. So if parents would like to learn more, they can visit the Department of Ed MCAS Parents page. There's a lot of resources there. I know it says coming soon, but I think they are there. And I think they're being updated as these changes continue to happen. So FAQs, descriptions of the items, they have released sample questions and also annotated with how many points students would get for certain questions. And they do have a parent guide that is available, translated in several different languages. Okay, that concludes the MCAS portion of the presentation. Does anybody have any questions about MCAS? No?
Good work.
All right.
Good
Yes,
work, you
congratulations
guys.
to all of you
Thank
wonderful
you.
people. We're going to shift back to Sue Forrest to do our baselines and benchmarks for ELA.
Yep, so I just have a couple speaking points. So the Developmental Reading Assessment, our DRA, is our singular diagnostic tool for reading. It's a fabulous tool that really informs the development of the reader, the skill set and the strategy set that they develop and apply broadly to the range of texts of increasing difficulty over the years. And so we currently administer this in the spring of kindergarten, but it had been administered in the fall, the spring, the winter, and the spring for grades 1 through 4. And we're making a little bit of a shift on that, but these are last spring's results here. If you look at kindergarten, it shows that 86% of our students were meeting the grade level benchmark. And then if you look at the numbers for the grade levels before, there seems to be a big gap between kindergarten and those, and I just want to qualify that. The band of texts within the kindergarten range is really more a measure of their concepts of print. So do they know that we read from left to right and top to bottom? Do they know the difference between a letter and a word? Can they find that? Can they do the one-to-one matching, pointing to each word spoken through the text? And so it does measure their oral reading accuracy with a relatively simple text and those concepts of print. When they start getting into the benchmark levels around first grade and then beyond, it's a solid measure of their oral reading accuracy coupled with their comprehension. The texts are more complex, there's substance to the stories or the informational texts that they're reading, and they're able to have a conversation about those texts, and we take a measure of comprehension that way. Once they hit the end of second grade benchmark, for the DRA, they're actually engaging in written comprehension. And so that's where we tend to see a little bit of a dip because kids can typically express their understanding orally before they can express it as cohesively in writing. So that's always qualified there. But what I'll tell you in comparison to where we've been before, all of those numbers continue to increase when I measured them against the results last year. So there's nothing alarming there, and I just think it's an indication that we are on track that way in terms of growing the skill set and the strategy set of our developing readers.
And Rich, for your benefit, this whole section of this report is really about our internal measures of data that we use at different grade levels to see how on par we are and how on track we are. And we started tracking it, I think in 2011-ish, 2010, over time, and we set goals for ourselves every 3 years so that we can see if the changes that we're making to our curriculum are really getting results in our assessments.
And then the last piece I have here is really kind of a small measure, but it's a great measure because I think we've mentioned before that several years ago now we took on a systematic phonics instructional approach called Foundations, and that all students K to 2 have engaged with. And, traditionally, way back in the day in kindergarten, they used to study a letter of the week. And I think that's really important. You remember, so we were all part of that. We were all part of that. And so what we know is that students are schooled more routinely. I mean, the increase in number of students who participate in preschool, and then, of course, with the onslaught of much more full-day kindergarten, the shape of what happens in kindergarten has necessarily changed. And the demands of course, of our world are changing and what our kiddos need to know. But so this is a measure at the end of the year of the percentage of students who recognize their uppercase letters, lowercase letters, and the sounds that those letters make. Now, the sound percentage will always be lower than the other two because that's a generative rather than a receptive skill in terms of what they're being asked to do. But when I compare these numbers, there's a slight dip in terms of where we've been with the lowercase as well as the sound compared to last year. But actually, we're performing at such high levels, and we really continue to attribute that to that instruction in the systematic phonics program, because we've really seen those numbers jump. So typically, when you start to perform at those high percentage levels, you're bound to plateau at some point, and it doesn't mean we don't continue to work forward. But, you know, with the different students, bodies of students each year, we may see a little bit of a plateau or a little dip before we continue to go back up, but nothing alarming there. Any questions on that?
Great. All right, back to Noelle.
And so for math, you'll see it's pretty consistent. But I thought you might be more interested in just sort of what we do with this in-house data than looking at these numbers that all look great. So we meet regularly with teachers. Our principals are so great and let us have release time with teachers to look at the data, to dig into it at the student level. What can we do to differentiate and meet needs right where they are? What standards do we need to work on as a class or as students? And the guided math model helps us to figure out exactly what groups of students need what. So these numbers are great, everything's good, but at the same time, what do we do with this data? And I've been saying this to teachers for a while. We assess them so we can instruct them. And so these assessments speak to now what's the next step in our practice and how can we adjust that practice so that we can meet their needs. And so that's kind of what I get out of this, less the numbers and just more what we do with that data.
Questions? So I'm going to piggyback on Noelle's point because I think it's really easy in the state of Massachusetts to sit here and pat ourselves on the back because we are number one in the country. We've been number one for a really long time. We continue to maintain that. We have the top scores in the world on PISA, and we are number one in AP in the country as well. And we know that, and I think a lot of other states know that too, but we're always trying to improve. And that is why we participate in the OECD, I can never say that right, OECD test for schools, so that we can have another measuring stick for ourselves, another basis for comparison, and a different type of assessment to tell us how our students are doing. And one of the things that I think is really special about Foxborough is the fact that we are always planning for what's next, even when we get results like this, where in reading, the only countries that scored better than us were Singapore, Hong Kong, China, and Canada. Fantastic. In math, Singapore and Hong Kong, China. And in science, Singapore and Japan. I mean, it's outstanding. But we don't want to stop there. So this is sort of our mantra. The earlier you start working on something, the earlier you'll see results. And we feel like we're always in that mode of trying to decide what's the next thing that we need to work on. So really, this report will inform all of the work that we'll continue to do this year. And then we'll see you again next year.
Good job.
Great job, guys.
All right, thanks for your attention.
Thank
I know
you
that's a
very
long
much.
way.
Thank
you.
It's interesting.
It's nice that you make it positive for us. Thank you.
Oh, you know what I forgot to say? Just before the administrators leave. These results are really something that we need to congratulate our students, our teachers, our administrators, our parents, and our community. So thank you all for being here. Because it takes a village to do this, and we may have a vision at the administrative level, but it needs to be upheld in the buildings, and it needs to be executed in the classrooms, and it needs to be embraced by the students. So really, that's what this is a reflection of. So thank you to all of you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, my. Oh, now, the school committee needs to vote on subcommittee appointments. One is for teachers' negotiations, and another is for educational assistant negotiations.
So yes, so as you're aware, we have a 3-year contract, and that is sunsetting in the end of this year in June.
Sunsetting.
So we need to have a team together to move forward, and in the past, we've had 2 representatives from school committee, one for the teacher negotiation, and then another 2 of you for the educational assistance negotiations. We anticipate to start that in December. It looks as though we're going to be looking at Wednesdays as far as meetings, after school, not set in stone, but at least kind of the preliminary looking at dates. So we would need 2 of you, if you can be available for which is really important work, because it's the contract that the teachers have with the school committee.
I'd like to do the teacher negotiations this time, because I did special ed last time, just because I'd like to see the difference between the two. Just, it doesn't make a difference, I mean, if anyone has preference.
Would you like to also?
I would be happy to, but, I have done it in the past.
Well, actually, the 3 of us are in some sort of obligation to recuse ourselves because we're former teachers. So it would help this committee and our image if both of you would be willing to do that for us.
Be happy to.
That
I might
just-
have to miss
One or
here
two.
or there, right.
I think that's one of the things that's so nice by having 2 representatives, because if
can
there
always
is one
keep-
that you need to miss, we still have representation there.
Yep. Wednesdays
And-
work.
Right. That would be great. So may I entertain a motion for,
I'll make a motion that Marilyn Weiss and Tina Bellinger represent the school committee on the teacher negotiations and the educational assistant negotiations.
oh, no.
Oh, just- no,
Just a teacher.
Nice
Nice
try.
Nice try. You guys are not off the hook. You guys are not off the hook.
Almost pulled it off.
That was good though,
Brilliant.
Chris. Nice try.
Teacher negotiations.
Could I have a second?
That was beautiful.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Thank you, ladies, for offering to do that for us.
And tentatively, it looks like December 12th would be the first meeting.
That's a
I
quick
think I'm just getting back.
That's typically a quick one, though. It's kind of a ground rules one, so it's,
Oh, I've missed
depending
one.
on what's in your schedule, it's not as bad.
And both of you have worked on things before, so it's not like you're brand new
I'll be there.
to ground rules.
I can do all of December.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
My pleasure.
So the educational assistants follow the teachers because there's only so many days of the week as far as bringing in, and some of those, like Todd Kaiser as the union president and Lisa Alden as the vice president, they're representing on both. So in order to have enough.
Lisa Alden?
Lisa Alden is the
It's supposed
vice
to be
president
16th of January.
for the union.
I can move my other dates, so. Right, go.
So that one would be offset a little bit further into the spring.
For the Wednesdays, will be every Wednesday, beginning December?
I don't know if it would be, I think we'll probably only have one meeting in December.
Okay.
And then once January hits, we'll start with a more regular,
Okay.
maybe 2 Wednesdays a month.
Okay. I just have one date that I'm away in January, that's it, that I won't be able to do.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it's great that the negotiations will begin at this early stage in the school year, not put it off until,
Crunch time.
March, April
Right.
timeframe. So, not that we ever have, but I
No,
just
but
wanted
it's
to
challenging.
say it's a lot of work and for everybody involved, our teachers and our administrators, and it's great to start the process early to be able to hammer out all the details. So, thank you for that.
And to mention that we haven't had to use lawyers in the last,
I know,
how many
but
that
I
we've
think
done.
working together slowly and not under pressure
Right.
has built up the trust.
right.
So that we all have time to listen to each other, and I think that's why it's, one of the reasons why it's been successful.
It's a good process.
So you two are doing the ed assistants.
Well, we need to make a motion.
Well, I think we need to make a motion.
Voluntold.
You can't do it?
No.
Because,
If it's right after school?
is it
We do meet after school.
right after school?
Yeah.
Can you make that?
Yeah, I can, as long as I'm not traveling or something, so, yeah, it's, yeah.
No, I
Is
guess that-
is it the same Wednesdays? Is that what it'll be too? or-
No, it'll be later.
No.
It'll be later. Usually we finish the teachers,
First.
or at least get it going before we get started into the ed assistants, so it's a late period.
Yeah, whatever.
When would it start?
February, March, right?
Be
mean, if-
March-ish.
if it-
February, March last
All
time,
right, if
I
it's
think.
March, I can do March.
Tentatively appointments and.
Yes, tentative,
Okay.
barring unforeseen.
I'll move that we appoint Richard and Chris as the subcommittee representatives to the educational assistant negotiations.
I'll second that.
All in favor? 500. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yes, thank you all in advance.
Get the first, I get the second. Okay. I'll get this short.
All righty. Oh, first reading.
So a little background here on this particular policy, our Internet Acceptable Use Policy, our AUP for students. This was just a few years ago revisited, really with a difference in philosophy and how we were looking at the policy, and not being a punitive policy and being more that it was educational and what we need to teach students as far as digital citizenship, the use of technology, and really being responsible. So as you read through this policy, you can really see that shift to what is responsible behaviors, and that it is a privilege to have this information. One of the things that has come to our attention, bless you.
Excuse me. Thank you.
With the prevalence of social media and outside of the school day use of social media as an example, it can carry over into the school day. But we, again, our hands are tied in a way in that when we look at free speech of students in the First Amendment. But we, at the same time, want to remind students that behavior online involves social media, and so that it's important for them to understand that what they're doing on social media outside of the school day can impact the school day itself. So there is a change here that we're proposing, and with the subcommittee to look at that, as far as how can we bring in that awareness of social media so that students are keeping in mind that when you are outside of the school day, that your behavior online can impact the school day as well. So it's more of a reminder when it comes to social media usage, and that you're representing the Foxborough Public Schools when you are making contributions online.
Ready?
We're ready.
All right.
Actually, one other piece, and Aaron Heyer could not be here with us this evening, and the title of this Internet Acceptable Use Policy, the recommendation to go in the flavor of being a responsible, the philosophy here is that to have the title be Internet Responsible Use Policy and not Acceptable Use. So that way it's more in alignment with the policy itself.
Should we specify that somewhere?
Where this is the first read,
Reading,
I
so
wanted
we
to
may-
bring that to the attention, so to insert the word for in the title, Internet Acceptable Use Policy, Internet Responsible Use Policy.
So it'd be RUP?
Yep. Yes.
I like that.
All right. File IJNDB, Internet Responsible Use Policy, RUP, students. It is the goal of the Foxborough Public Schools to provide a world-class education to all students. The Internet is one of the many information resources available to students as part of that process. Through the Internet, students can access data from colleges and universities, scientific research facilities, government resources, and many other informative sites throughout the world. Due to the global nature of the Internet and the lack of effective control over its content, access brings with it the potential for misuse and abuse. The Foxborough Public Schools will make every reasonable effort to ensure the Internet is used responsibly and will take every reasonable step to control access to inappropriate material. The Foxborough Public Schools expect all students to use the Internet in an appropriate and responsible manner. Be aware that consistent with the school committee, district policies and rules, including but not limited to harassment, discrimination, bullying, all actions taken on social media platforms, whether school-based or private, that impact the school environment may lead to disciplinary actions and/or loss of privileges.
Access to the internet is a privilege offered to the students, at the discretion of the administrators and staff at each school. While at school, students may only log on using the school account and/or appropriate accounts for educational use. Foxborough Public School account is to be used for authorized educational purposes only, including research for school projects and intellectual inquiry.
The school district will educate all students about appropriate online behavior, including interacting with other individuals on social media and cyberbullying awareness and response. Age-appropriate training on online behavior, cyberbullying, will be conducted annually through the district's technology skills curriculum and social skills curriculum. Students are expected to use the internet in a responsible manner. Students are not to transmit, receive, submit, publish, or otherwise access information deemed inappropriate, including but not limited to material that is defamatory, inaccurate, abusive, obscene, profane, racially or gender offensive, unethical, sexually oriented, or illegal.
Foxborough Public Schools technology exists solely for authorized educational purposes. Any use of school technology that results or is reasonably predicted by school administration to result in any disruption or disorder to the school environment is subject to school disciplinary policies and/or loss of privileges. Unauthorized game playing is prohibited. Hacking, any attempt to gain prohibited access to or malicious attempt to harm or destroy data or to upload, download, or otherwise create computer viruses will not be tolerated.
Students are expected to conform to accepted social behavior in their use of the internet, netiquette. Users shall refrain from plagiarizing the works of others obtained over the internet, and are to respect copyrighted material and to properly credit all work cited from internet resources. Students must immediately notify his or her teacher and/or system administrator if a security problem is discovered.
Inappropriate behavior on the part of any student while using a Foxborough Public Schools computing device, software, data, and network and internet connectivity shall result in the loss of privileges or disciplinary actions. Under appropriate circumstances, law enforcement officials may be notified. The Foxborough Public School System, along with any other persons or organizations associated with the school internet connectivity, will not be liable for the actions of anyone connecting to the internet through the school. All users shall assume liability, legal, financial, or otherwise, for their actions while connected to the internet. In addition, the Foxborough Public Schools takes no responsibility for any information or materials accessed or transferred from the internet. Parents or guardians agree to accept financial responsibility for any damages or expenses incurred as a result of inappropriate or illegal student activity while using Foxborough Public School technology.
The Foxborough Public School System makes no guarantee, implied or otherwise, regarding the validity of information accessed on the internet, nor does it guarantee protection against corruption of electronic files when information is downloaded. The Foxborough Public School System reserves the right to monitor local network and internet traffic. This includes information sent or received through our online connections or stored on our computer systems. Students should not expect their use to remain private. The Foxborough Public School System reserves the right to modify these guidelines at any time. The source is the Foxborough High School Handbook, cross-reference JICFB Bullying Prevention, NDBR Acceptable Use Policy Technology, JIC Student Conduct and Discipline, Mass General Law Chapter 7182. Do I have to read the policy adopted on those?
No. Because this is up for adoption, so.
There's a lot of work that we do with our students. We talk about posting on any of the social media sites. And when we think about tonight, where we had the discussion on ACTs and AP courses and preparing students for college, just again, reminding them that anything that they post on any of these social media sites, it's not that it goes away. It's still accessible. It's still there. It's building their brand. So providing this reminder here, this insertion, is just one more reminder of social media platforms, again, being a part of building your brand, and that there can be consequences for any of those that were to be posting information that would impact the school setting. We do a lot with, reminding students, even at the lower, don't give out your name, don't give out your passwords. Remember what you're posting, anyone can see it. You might delete it, but it's still there, it's still accessible. So again, it's awareness, it's a matter of being a responsible user.
And we try to take advantage of the fact that when they make a mistake here, it's a teachable moment. Like a fourth grader sharing their password to a math, it's this Prodigy game, and someone could change your avatar without your permission if they have your password. And that's happened, and we use it as a teachable moment. And that's benign, and it's better to catch it while it's benign.
Oh, yes. Okay.
But reminders
Well-
too, when we're wanting to post something after, it's a game or it's an event and it's outside, and just think before you post.
Always good advice.
That is very good advice.
I know that when we revised the policy 3 years ago, we spent a lot of time talking about free speech and making sure that our language was consistent with the First Amendment. And I know you and I had talked about the fact that this language was provided by our counsel and has sort of gone through that vetting as well. So I'm more comfortable with it from that perspective. Because it is a little bit of a slippery slope when you're talking about, what students are doing at home on their private devices and, things that might be, political or religious that might, potentially create an impact or a problem, but also are within the protections of the First Amendment. So I do think the language is fine, and it is a good reminder, because there are lots of things we want to make sure our students are doing to protect themselves and to protect their friends and fellow students, but and the school environment, but we also want to be, constitutional.
Correct.
So, thank you for that.
I need a motion to move this forward to a second reading.
I'll move to move the Internet Responsible Use Policy, RUP students, forward to a second reading.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Thank you very much. Mr. Euchre, you are up.
This is, this is kind of a housekeeping. We've done this in the past, and I just want to make sure the committee is aware of where we're going with this and how we use this. As you all know, we have a number of revolving accounts that are used during the year. They range anywhere from transportation, athletics, building rental, adult education, extended day, and so on. And typically those expenses, part of it is done during the budget process where we tell you where we're using outside resources to cover things, but part of it is done just as the regular course of business. However, in this particular case, because I think we're going to be doing a substantial hit against one of the accounts, I just wanted to make sure that the committee is fully aware of it and in agreement with it before we move forward on it. And it's the building revolver, rental revolver. We've used it in the past. Last time we did use it in a big way was when we actually developed the turf fields and the 2 softball and baseball fields to help cover some of the costs that were outside of what we had raised either through town money or grants, so on. As you know, in this case, the current track and concession stand facilities, we did go out to bid. We were $20,000 over on the bid with the best bid that we had, which was significantly lower than the other 3. We moved forward because the assumption would be that we'd use the building revolver as the offset, if you will. As typical in any of these projects, as did happen on the other 2 as well, when we get into the project, certain things come up and we want to make sure that we have the rights and the abilities to make sure we do a better job than not do something and end up costing us more down the road. So I'll give you 2 very good examples. In this particular case, we would like to build 2 storage sheds that will go along with the track and the turf field. One basically would actually be at the end of the track, and it would cover where all of the hurdles and mats and stuff would go. It's the most logical place to put it, but again, if we do it now, we didn't have enough money to cover the whole cost, but the theory was with the site guys on site, if we at least get them to put in the base, the pad that it's going to go on, we don't have to come in with heavy equipment and disrupt anything in the future. So instead of what the cost would have been, roughly $40,000 for each one of those sheds, for about $4,000, we can put the pads in on each one of them and finish all the grading, finish everything that goes up to them, and not have to have a lot of disturbance in the future. In one case we looked at, another case we looked at was some electrical wiring, and the ability to actually be able to flip this track so that we could run from either side, depending on the daylight and stuff, meant we would have to have the ability to have start controls on both sides of the track. We obviously had built it to have it on one side. Again, timing is everything. We do it now or we don't do it because we can't go onto the track later and pull this wiring into the turf field side of it. So, you know, again, this is not unusual. I've done this on every project we've had, but I just want to make sure that you're aware. The revolver currently has about $168,000 in it. We have tried to build it up over the last few years, knowing that these projects were coming, so that would give us some leeway. And you know, my feeling is that by the time we're done with both the concession and the turf and the stands, that we will hit enough little things that will really mass up to most of that money. The concession itself is really going to go way over what we had initially anticipated, and a lot of that's because of the utilities. We have to get a pressurized system for the sewer lines, as an example, from the new concession stand all the way around the back of the building, which means we have to trench all the way around through everything, go through parking lots. There's a lot of expense there. The building under the current building code is different than what we anticipated, and I'll give you an example of that. We were anticipating a building that basically would just shut down for the winter. No big deal. We don't have to have it insulated, no real issues that way, because you're not going to use it during the winter time. Unfortunately, current building code says if you're going to introduce heat, which we would have to have heat in there in November and October and early in the season for the bathrooms and stuff.
Sorry,
then the building has to be as if it were a fully used building, which means it has to be fully insulated, interior between block walls on the ceilings and all of that. So that's all raising some of the price factors that we have to deal with. So that's why I'm just saying, you know, this is one of our resource areas that gives us the ability to kind of cover some of those things as we move forward. And you know, like I said, we've done it typically without having a lot of discussion with the school committee, but because there is a fair amount that we'll be actually looking to use, I want to make sure that you're aware of it and that you're in favor of it, that you don't have an issue with it.
Well, it makes perfect sense to me to get the slabs put in.
Yeah, our intent is we wouldn't do anything that isn't the best for the school for the long term. But I always look at these projects and you know, unfortunately or fortunately, I've had enough experience with these projects that I can look at things and know when it's going to be something that's cheaper to do now than it is to do later.
Oh, yeah.
And far less disruption.
Right, exactly. And again, you have to be very careful that, because, like I said, the electrical is the perfect one because I can't go back underneath the track at a later date.
So that's to move where the starting line is?
It gives you the ability to have the starting line on both sides of the track.
Do many?
You can start on the concession stand.
Do most schools have those?
Well, most schools don't have what we're
I was
building.
gonna say,
We're building an
the
8-lane,
they have
track facility which is really one that can be used on a much bigger level than what most schools have. We can be in competitions, we can be in state tournament things.
So the intent is we do that, and then more people would rent the track and use it. Okay.
So again, I'm trying to look at it from the perspective of what the committee has already bought into, which is that it is what it is. It's kind of the super facility for what most schools will have, and I think it's important that we do it. The athletic revolving fund, as an example, what we did was we built that up a little because we knew we were going to take the turf field offline. So that we had to have some resource to allow Rich to go out and rent fields for a lot of the teams that are playing, because without that, especially with the season we've had, we would have been crushed. So I think we're very practical on how we use these things, but again, these are accounts that are under the school committee's control. So I want to be very upfront that you understand that this is exactly what we're doing and move through with the project there.
I think that's exciting with both.
Well, I think I would like the authority by the school committee to use the funding on the building revolver to, again, complete any needs that the track and concession stands have that were outside the original contract.
So anything
You got that,
unforeseen?
Jen?
This is kind of.
She already has it.
This is
Whoever
kind of like
makes
our,
the
when I
motion.
look at it like on a building project, on the borough as an example, there's a contingency line. Well, on this type of project, we don't have a contingency line. So when little things come up, you have to be able to address them. This is how we've always felt that we could address them on our buildings, with projects at this level. Obviously, at something like the borough school, we're talking $1 million contingency line, so.
That's not the case here.
Yeah, a little harder to deal with, so.
I appreciate your forethinking and notifying us, and in my short time here, I've developed some trust in the way you're thinking these things out to save us money. But I also think it's important for the public to be aware that you're coming to us in a very open, transparent manner, and that's what we're here for. So I think that's very valuable for us all, so thank you. Thank you for doing that, because that's what this is for.
Right, and it's out in the open so that it's, when it comes, nobody should be surprised.
Absolutely agreed.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? We like your contingency plan, Mr.
Thank you very
Huber.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Well, just as another reminder, every Friday, 3 of us go in to sign the warrants, so we see every check that has been cut, over the previous course of the previous week. So it's not like there's no oversight.
But
No, but
this
then
is,
also
but
this
the
is
reason I'm doing
making
this is
it
very
public.
similar to
Exactly.
why you get budget
Right.
updates,
Correct.
which will start in the next, usually will start, actually probably the next school committee meeting here, is that those budget updates are basically that the school committee understands that we have made a switch or a change.
Exactly.
A lot of times we will have a need within a certain account, and even though we have bottom line, autonomy, the school committee really is responsible to know that we took money from, the borough school expense line to the borough school, travel line or whatever, just making that up. On a basis. It's not, not that we can't do it, it's that you're supposed to be responsible and you're supposed to be signing off on the fact that we do it. So that's why that budget statement is very important. This, I feel, is kind of like the same thing, just on a different tact of what we're doing.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Very good.
Agreed.
Well, we have moved on to, thank you, Bill, for all of that. We have moved on to other matters. Mr. Pearson?
I did attend the bid auction the other night, and got to put my tickets in a bunch of baskets and got nothing out of it. But I put my tickets in as I should, right? I supported the schools. Right?
Yes.
But as everyone knows, it's such a great event, and certainly we're appreciative for the parents to come out. It's a great night out for the parents. So if you haven't done it, do it next year. It's just a great night out for you to celebrate the schools.
Well,
and support
these
them, so.
two ran them for years.
We worked behind the scenes for 100 years.
Yeah. So I attended that, so it was great to go there to attend that. And I also attended the girls' field hockey game last night, actually talking about moving fields, right? Which was actually a wonderful opportunity for our kids to move off of grass to turf at the field hockey, at the state level. Playing field hockey on turf is really where it needs to be, and that's where the athletes want to be. So Rich, our athletic director, I think worked out moving the game over to their turf. Is that correct, in Mansfield?
Yep.
So to play a tournament game. It was a really wonderful game. The girls played great. It was an unfortunate loss in the shootout area, which was just amazing. But I actually also think the girls should be noted for their sportsmanship, too. At the end of the game, in a painful loss when it goes that far. Just absolutely painful, because we know how kids can be. They stood up. I know the coach supported them, lined up and did what they should have done. So we got to commend our kids for a great season, but also being great people and doing the right thing. So it was really great. And I think someone else might mention soccer, but I know soccer also won, so congratulations.
Oh, I know, soccer won its first,
Girls and boys.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. I didn't know about, the girl.
first tier.
Yeah.
All I have is, if you haven't already voted, make sure you go out tomorrow and vote.
Marilyn?
I was talking to Tina earlier, asking about the football. What'd I do? The football, they do have a fan bus going, and it'll be online tomorrow on the Foxborough Touchdown Club. You said it was $3 per person. It's just for current students.
Yeah.
Not outside, not graduates, nothing. It's just the current students. So if you need to get tickets for that, you would go on Foxborough Touchdown Club?
No, that, you can
Something
sign up
separate.
in the athletic director's office for that email, but the tickets online to Fenway Park
Okay.
goes on sale tomorrow.
Okay, and that's for us to purchase?
Yeah.
Okay. And that was it?
Joe?
Question for Mrs. White, since you brought that up,
did that mean like after program students, like post-12?
I believe you're still considered a student here, Joe.
Okay,
You're always going to be a student here until you graduate the program.
right, because after that, I wouldn't be.
Correct. After you graduate the school. Even though you graduated in 2016, you're still a student here
Yeah.
until you age out.
Yeah, I aged
you-
out in
right.
2020.
Right, and you're a student until 2020.
Yes,
Okay?
okay,
So you can go on that fan bus.
okay.
Or you can hitch a ride at Mrs. Weiss.
Mrs. Bellinger?
Well, we have our musical coming up next weekend,
First one-
Footloose, the first one in a
in
while.
10 years,
Yeah.
a decade,
Very
at
exciting.
the high
And,
school,
it's,
instead of off campus. Okay.
Yep, it's going to be the 15th, 16th, and 17th, and I think those tickets are available online as well. I saw a flyer on.
posters are up,
and the
too.
posters are up around school, and there's a YouTube promotional video that I would encourage the committee
Oh,
to
really?
watch.
So-
It's
so
really cool.
What do we look it up?
Well, you can go to my Facebook page, Bevy, since we are Facebook friends, because I
Okay.
posted it there.
Okay,
So if
okay.
you want to tonight, but it's really great, and I think it's going to be a fantastic show. And Scott Walker, our middle school English teacher, is the director, and I know that Amy and Debbie Spinelli worked very hard with a devoted group of parents to bring musical theater back to the high school, and I think there's a lot of excitement about this production. So hopefully we will put a lot of people in the seats.
I hope so.
I know I'm going to go.
I will be there.
Dr. Berdos and I, along with quite a few of our educators, got to attend the MassQ conference, which is Massachusetts Computer Using Educators. And we had groups from our middle and elementary schools actually presented how they use technology in the classroom. They got to meet Pat Patriot. It was at Gillette Stadium. It was a fantastic opportunity to see how our teachers are leaders in their field, and they got to present to colleagues from all over, not just the Commonwealth, people from Rhode Island, Connecticut, like all over the place. So I thought it was really a great opportunity. It was an
Great.
awesome day. Yeah.
Dr. Edos?
So I had in your packet here under other matters a letter that was
isn't that
received
wonderful?
from who is considered the modern day postman, and his name is Lowell.
I think this is
I
wonderful.
hope to God you sent $7 or $8. I'm going to if you
Yes.
didn't.
I was about to say I would have too. I was
So
thinking the
he
same
sent this postcard from 1930 of Foxborough High School. And he talks about in his letter here about how it's his hobby of redistribution of happiness. And he goes, and he found this in California. He found this particular postcard in an antique store, and he sent this to me. And so I did a little bit of research and found out that 2 years ago he sent a postcard to Debbie as well.
He wasn't sure on his letter.
He
whether
wasn't
had
sure,
sent it.
so I wrote him a letter back. I took his postcard, I went outside the IGO, and Janet took a picture holding his postcard, and then put it all in this collage to send what present day it looks like along with this.
That's awesome.
Sent him a little Foxborough magnet, sent him a
that's
book of
nice.
stamps to continue his hobby of redistributing, the redistribution of happiness. And
Isn't that
let
great
him
at
know,
90?
that we were appreciative of this little piece of history
Absolutely.
that he sent to us.
And then when she had just received it, so she comes running, I have something to show you. So I got my copy early. And believe you me, I went right out in front of the IGO building, and I'm doing this exactly what Amy did. And, I didn't take a picture, but just to make sure all the windows are just right. And of course, that's no longer a door, but a window. You can see it. And I got the biggest kick out of his. My wife used to laugh at me and say, if you hear from them, you'll have to take me out to lunch. Isn't that
It's a
great?
win-win for her.
And he's 90.
I know.
I know, isn't that wonderful?
So what a
Assisted
great
living.
hobby.
Oh, my God.
And just a little piece of the past and continuing to move it forward, so.
I'm going to Google him when I get home, see if there's any story on him.
And I'm still going strong as far as I know. Here we are to live up to him.
And the only other piece, received this letter in the mail. I think it's always important to do a shout out. Our administrators, as you saw that they were all here this evening, they were here the night that we're talking about the culture and climate survey data. They do a lot in our schools every day, but they also do things outside of our schools. They take on additional responsibilities. And this was a letter I received from the Massachusetts School Administrator Association, and it was about Diana being on the board of directors here. And it was just a letter that they wanted to send to talk about her contributions of being a member of their board of directors, and that how she has assumed the committee's mission and has already made her mark with her leadership, her involvement, her instincts, and her charisma, and wanted to send this letter of appreciation and the support of the school district in her taking this active role on this board of directors. And I think it's important to recognize our administrators that go beyond their role here in the schools, and they take on these leadership roles. It benefits us as a district, as they learn from other districts and other districts learn from us. So, thank you to Diana for stepping up and taking on an additional leadership role.
I was looking at the administrators here, and I'm thinking of all the different boards. A lot of those same people that were sitting there tonight were the ones that I've been in boards with many, many years. They're the same. I see them over and
like
over.
Mrs. Waz is working
Always
towards
on
her
something.
PhD.
Yeah. And she's always on every board.
Go get it. She just is pushing herself to get better for the students.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
I'm very impressed with all of them.
Well, and I just wish everybody a very thoughtful Veterans Day. Appreciation to all those who have served. So I will now enter a motion to adjourn, I believe is the word.
Make a motion to adjourn. I'll second that.
All in favor? 5-0. Thank you, people.
Tell Janet.